You know that moment when your whole world just tilts? When the ground you thought was solid suddenly gives way beneath your feet? I found the bank statements by accident. It wasn't some dramatic, intentional snooping. It was just a misplaced envelope, a casual glance, and then a chilling realization. 8 years of $500 wires, every single month, to someone named L. Morgan. No memo, no explanation. Just a steady, silent bleed from our joint account. When I first asked Dean, my husband, about it, he'd simply said it was for his sick sister, Lydia. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, my partner. We had no secrets. Or so I thought. I believed him until the day I followed the address on the last transfer. A nagging suspicion turning into a cold dread, and found not a sick sister, but a toddler wearing his eyes. My husband had a secret child. Dean and I, we were that couple. You know the ones. The ones who still held hands in the grocery line, who finished each other's sentences, who genuinely seemed to enjoy each other's company even after years. We tied the knot in 2012, a small, sweet ceremony that felt like the start of everything good and honest. Our love story wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a slow, steady burn, built on shared laughter and quiet understanding. I worked in marketing, building brands, and crafting narratives, while he was a whiz in HVAC sales, always charming clients and closing deals. We weren't rich, not by a long shot. Money was tight, as it often is for young couples starting out, but it was doable. We were a team, navigating budgets and dreaming big. We split bills down the middle, meticulously tracking every dollar. We even had this quirky little joint savings jar on the fridge, where we'd toss spare change and small bonuses, watching it grow with a shared sense of accomplishment. Our mantra was simple, unwavering. No secrets, ever. We swore to it, promising to lay everything bare, to face life's challenges hand in hand, with complete transparency. I truly, deeply believed we were an unbreakable unit. Life continued in its comfortable rhythm until 2014. That yes, when Dean started picking up extra overtime shifts. He'd come home exhausted, but with a proud glint in his eye, talking about how he was building our future. He said he wanted to squirrel away more money, specifically for the kids we planned to have. My heart swelled with love and pride. What a devoted husband, I thought. He was working so hard for us. Then, one Tuesday evening, my world shifted slightly off its axis. I was tidying up the mail, just mindlessly sorting through envelopes, when I opened one that wasn't meant for my eyes. It was an unmarked bank letter, slipped discreetly into a stack of junk mail. Inside, a statement, and right there, staring back at me, was a $500 outgoing transfer. My stomach did a little flip. I'd never seen anything like it. When Dean walked in, I held up the statement, my voice a little shaky. "What's this, honey?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my heart was thrumming. He paused, his expression clouding for a split second before a practiced smile smoothed it over. He pulled me into a tight hug, his voice soft, almost a whisper. "Lydia's kidneys are worse. I didn't want to worry you." Lydia, his older sister. She'd been sick since college, a vague, chronic illness that always seemed to hover in the background of family conversations. It felt like a plausible explanation. I immediately felt a flush of shame, a prickle of guilt. Here I was, prying, questioning his generosity to his ailing sister. It felt petty, small. "Oh, Dean," I murmured, my initial suspicion melting into remorse. I apologized, genuinely, for snooping, for doubting him. To make amends, I even made him his favorite hot cocoa, stirring in extra marshmallows. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and the incident was seemingly forgotten. But a tiny, almost imperceptible seed of unease had been planted. That initial flutter of doubt, was quickly buried under the weight of his reassuring words and my own desire to believe. But the seed, once planted, still needed water to grow, and it got it. Every 28th of the month, like clockwork, that $500 disappeared from our account. It became a silent, almost invisible ritual. Dean, being the more financially inclined of us, always handled our online banking. He was meticulous, organized, and I trusted him implicitly with our shared finances. So, I rarely logged in myself. Why would I? He had it covered. But when I did occasionally check our balance, just out of curiosity or to transfer some funds, it always seemed smaller than I expected. Our savings, our checking, they never quite matched the mental picture I had of them. When I'd bring it up, a gentle query about why our nest egg wasn't growing faster, he'd have a ready answer. "Inflation, babe," he'd say with a shrug. Or, "I splurged on some new tools for work, you know how it is." He'd make it sound so normal, so mundane. And because I trusted him, because I loved him, I swallowed the lump in my throat. I pushed down the tiny voice of concern that whispered, "Is this right?" Instead of questioning further, I'd find ways to compensate. I'd skip my salon appointments, opting to color my hair at home, saving $20 here, $30 there. I'd search for coupons, choose the store brand, put off buying new clothes. I was trying to make up for a deficit I couldn't quite articulate, a nagging feeling that our money wasn't stretching as far as it should. It was a subtle, insidious erosion, slowly chipping away at our financial foundation, and at my peace of mind, without me even fully realizing the cause. By 2017, the quiet drain on our finances became impossible to ignore. Our dream of buying a house, a cozy starter home with a little yard for future kids, felt like it was constantly just out of reach. Life, in its cruel way, has a knack for revealing truths when you least expect them, or when you're forced to look. Last spring, I landed a fantastic new client, a big step up for my career. The HR department needed our bank's routing number for my direct deposit form. Simple enough, right? Except Dean was out on a job site, miles away, in an area with notoriously spotty cell service. I couldn't reach him. Impatient and wanting to get the paperwork done, I decided to log into our shared online banking account myself. It was something I rarely did, always deferring to Dean, but this was an urgent need. I typed in the password, clicked enter, and there it was, our financial world, laid bare on the screen. I navigated to the recent transactions, scrolling down, looking for the routing number, and then my eyes snagged on the latest $500 transfer. But this time, something was different. A tiny detail, easily overlooked, but glaringly obvious once seen. There was an address saved under beneficiary. Not Lydia's Chicago apartment, the one we'd sent her Christmas cards to for years. No, this address was in Joliet, about 40 miles south of us. Joliet. My pulse began to pound, a frantic drumbeat in my ears so loud I could almost taste metal in my mouth. My breath hitched. Lydia didn't live in Joliet. She lived in Chicago. A cold, creeping dread began to spread through my veins, chilling me from the inside out. My hands started to tremble, the mouse suddenly feeling like a foreign object. This wasn't a sick sister. This wasn't an innocent mistake. This was something else entirely. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, that my world was about to be irrevocably changed. My mind immediately went into overdrive, a frantic scramble to find a rational explanation. Overreacting, I told myself. It's probably just a temporary address. Maybe she's staying with a friend there while she gets treatment. I tried to logic my way out of the burgeoning panic, to convince myself that this was all a misunderstanding. But the seed of doubt, now fully watered and grown into a thorny bush, wouldn't let me go. I couldn't shake the image of that address, so far from what I knew. So on a Saturday, with Dean ostensibly at work, I quietly typed the Joliet address into Google Maps. My finger hovered over the Street View icon, a part of me desperately hoping it would be a hospital, a clinic, anything that would align with Lydia's supposed illness. But when the image loaded, my stomach lurched. It wasn't a hospital. It was a modest duplex, nestled on a quiet residential street, and on the small patch of lawn, brightly colored tricycles lay scattered. A small plastic slide stood sentinel. Children's toys. My stomach churned, a knot of pure dread tightening in my gut. I told myself I was crazy, that I was jumping to conclusions, that this was all a terrible mistake. But my car keys were in my hand, and the engine was already running. The drive itself was a blur of internal arguments. Turn back. This is insane. You're going to regret this. But a stronger, more primal urge pushed me forward. I had to know. I had to see. I parked across the street, my heart hammering against my ribs, each beat a painful thud. I sat there, trying to regulate my breathing, watching the house. And then, she emerged. A woman, about my age, maybe a little younger, stepping out onto the porch. And behind her, holding her hand, was a little boy. He had the same dimpled chin as Dean, the same sandy, tousled curls. He looked up at her, his bright eyes full of adoration, and called her, clear as day, Mama. The world didn't just tilt then. It spun violently off its axis, throwing me into a chaotic, dizzying freefall. The air rushed out of my lungs, leaving me gasping, choked by the crushing weight of the truth. I don't remember the drive home. It was a haze of shock and disbelief. My body felt numb, my mind a cacophony of accusations and shattered memories. I walked into our silent house that evening, the weight of the day pressing down on me. The image of that little boy burned into my retinas. Dean was already home, unwinding on the couch, oblivious to the earthquake that had just rocked my world. I didn't say a word. I simply walked into the kitchen, picked up the printed photo of the duplex, the one with the tricycles on the lawn, and laid it deliberately on our kitchen table. The silence that followed was deafening, thick with unspoken truths. Dean's eyes, when he finally looked at the photo, widened in a mixture of horror and dawning recognition. The color drained from his face, leaving it ash gray. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, or perhaps like he'd just been caught. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He tried again, his voice a strained whisper, barely audible. It's not what you think. The classic line, the cliché. And yet, in that moment, it was all he could manage. My gaze was steady, unwavering, boring into him. I waited. The silence stretched, excruciating, until he finally broke, the words tumbling out, louder this time, tinged with desperation. She's not my sister. The room, which had been spinning earlier, now felt like it was doing a violent carousel ride. Not his sister? Then who? The next words were barely a whisper, a confession dragged from the depths of his shame. She's my ex. The kid is mine. 8 years. 8 years of $500 disappearing from our account, every month without fail. It wasn't charity. It wasn't a selfless act for a sick sister. It was hush money, pure and simple. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing my breath, leaving me reeling in a void of betrayal. The confession, once started, seemed to unravel Dean completely. The dam had burst, and the truth, ugly and painful, came flooding out. He spoke in halting, broken sentences, his eyes darting around, unable to meet mine. He met Lexi, the mother of his child, back in 2010. It was during a brief, tumultuous period when Dean and I had hit a rough patch and decided to take a break. A few weeks, we called it, to figure things out. A few weeks that turned into a lifetime of secrets. Lexi got pregnant during that time. Dean claimed she didn't tell him until after our wedding, which felt like a particularly cruel twist of fate. By then, I was blissfully posting honeymoon photos on social media, basking in the glow of our new marriage, completely unaware that my husband was simultaneously signing a secret paternity agreement. The irony, the sheer audacity of it, was sickening. His sick sister story, the elaborate lie he'd maintained for nearly a decade, wasn't just a cover for financial aid. It was a meticulously crafted shield, designed to buy silence and, quite literally, diapers. He'd been living a double life, maintaining two separate realities, and I, his wife, the woman who shared his bed and his dreams, had been utterly oblivious. The weight of his deception was crushing. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the years, the trust, the shared future that had been built on such a shaky, deceitful foundation. Every memory, every shared laugh, every intimate moment suddenly felt tainted, recontextualized by this monstrous secret. The air in our house, once a sanctuary, now felt toxic, suffocating. I couldn't breathe. Every object, every photograph, every corner seemed to echo with his betrayal. The walls themselves felt like they were closing in, pressing down on me. I grabbed a small bag, throwing in only essentials, my hands shaking so violently I could barely zip it closed. I needed out. I needed space to process this monumental lie. I booked a motel room on the outskirts of town, a sterile, anonymous space that felt like a fitting backdrop for my unraveling world. I stared at the ceiling until sunrise, my mind a relentless loop of Dean's confession, the image of that child, the years of deception. Sleep was impossible. My phone, meanwhile, became a relentless tormentor. Dean blew it up with texts, each one a desperate plea, an attempt at justification. "I was protecting you," one read. "I didn't want to lose you," another pleaded. Each text felt like a shard of glass, piercing deeper into my already wounded heart. Protection? Loss? His words felt hollow, self-serving. He hadn't protected me. He had robbed me. He hadn't feared losing me. He had actively risked it for years. With trembling fingers, I finally typed a reply, my anger and hurt coalescing into a single devastating sentence. "You robbed me of choices for 8 years." It wasn't just the money. It was the choice to know, the choice to decide if I wanted to be married to a man with a secret child, the choice to build a future based on truth, not a carefully constructed fiction. He had stolen my agency, my right to informed consent in my own life. Monday morning, despite the emotional wreckage, a cold, hard resolve set in. I needed facts. I needed numbers. The emotional fallout was overwhelming, but the practical implications were stark. I marched into our bank, my head held high, and requested every single statement for the past 8 years, every transaction, every outgoing wire. The teller looked at me with a hint of concern, but I just nodded, refusing to meet her gaze. I spent the next few hours, hunched over my kitchen table, a mountain of paper spread before me, meticulously highlighting every $500 transfer to L. Morgan. The lawyer's advice, while practical, felt like a cold comfort. My heart still ached with a deeper, more complex wound. As I sat with the financial statements, a new thought began to form, one that felt counterintuitive, even dangerous. What about Lexi, the other woman, the mother of Dean's secret child? My initial impulse was rage, resentment, blame. But as I thought about it, a different narrative began to emerge. How much did she know? Was she a willing participant in this elaborate deception, or another victim? I decided I needed to know. I drafted a note, carefully choosing my words. No anger, no accusations, just a simple, stark statement. I know. I included my number and mailed it to the Joliet address. The waiting was excruciating. A few days later, my phone buzzed. A voice memo. I listened, my heart pounding. Lexi's voice was shaking, raw with emotion. She didn't know Dean was married for the first 3 years of their arrangement. She genuinely believed he was single, that he was just a man helping her raise their son, When she finally found my Facebook profile, when she saw our wedding photos, our life together, she confronted Dean. He, ever the master manipulator, had sworn to her that we were separated, that our marriage was over in all but name, that he was just waiting for the right time to leave me. Another layer of lies. She explained her situation, how she worked double shifts as a CNA, barely making ends meet. The $500 he sent, she confessed, kept her from the food banks, kept a roof over her son's head. And in that moment, listening to her shaky voice, her genuine distress, I believed her. The anger I felt towards her evaporated, replaced by a strange, unexpected empathy. We cried over the phone, two strangers stitched together by the same thread of betrayal, both victims of Dean's intricate web of deceit. It was a bizarre, heartbreaking connection, but a connection nonetheless. Dean, perhaps sensing the monumental shift in our dynamic, perhaps genuinely overwhelmed by the crumbling edifice of his lies, agreed to couples therapy. I think deep down, it was mostly to ease his own crushing guilt, to find some semblance of absolution. The first session was a minefield. The therapist, a kind but firm woman, listened patiently as I laid out the bare bones of the story. Then she turned to Dean, her gaze steady. "Why the secrecy, Dean?" she asked, her voice gentle but probing. He squirmed, visibly uncomfortable, his gaze fixed on the floor. He finally whispered, "Shame." He feared losing everything: his church friends, his parents' pride, his image as the perfect son-in-law, and most of all, me. He painted a picture of a man trapped by his own initial lie, digging a deeper hole with every passing year. He claimed he didn't know how to stop, how to tell me without destroying everything. The therapist then turned to me, her eyes compassionate. "What do you need right now to even begin to consider moving forward?" My answer was immediate, unequivocal. Every ledger, every truth, every password. I needed absolute transparency, a complete stripping away of all financial veils. I needed to see everything, to understand the full scope of his deception, to know that there were no more hidden corners. Dean, after a moment of hesitation, reached for his laptop. It felt like a confessional, the glowing screen illuminating the stark reality of our fractured trust. He opened it, logged in, and began to scroll, revealing years of hidden transactions, a secret history I was only just beginning to uncover. As Dean scrolled through the endless pages of his online banking, laying bare years of transactions, I felt a strange mix of dread and morbid curiosity. Each click of the mouse revealed another layer of his carefully constructed financial life. And then, my eyes snagged on something else. Another recurring transfer. This one, $200 monthly, consistently sent to someone named Pastor Jim. My breath hitched. Pastor Jim? From his church? My mind raced, trying to connect the dots, trying to make sense of yet another hidden payment. Dean, seeing where my gaze had landed, hung his head even lower, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The confession that followed was perhaps even more heartbreaking than the first. Lexi's son, his son, has a rare blood disorder, a serious chronic condition that requires weekly injections. Injections that, devastatingly, insurance wouldn't cover. The $200 to Pastor Jim wasn't for the pastor himself. It was discreetly funneled through the church's benevolence fund to help cover the astronomical cost of his son's medication. Dean had been doubling up on his HVAC shifts, working late into the nights, taking every extra job he could find, not just to send Lexi the $500, but to keep both households afloat, to ensure his child received life-saving treatment. In that moment, watching this man, my husband, disintegrate under the weight of his own lies, his desperation, his secret burden, something inside me broke open. The black and white narrative of villain and victim blurred into shades of gray. He wasn't just a liar. He was a terrified father, caught in a web of his own making, trying to protect everyone, even if it meant destroying himself and inadvertently us. It didn't excuse his actions, not by a long shot, but it added a profound, agonizing layer of complexity to the betrayal. The therapist, observing the raw, exposed vulnerability in the room, allowed the silence to hang for a moment, letting the weight of this new revelation settle. Then, her voice soft but direct, she posed the question that loomed over everything. "Do you want out?" It was a simple question, but the implications were seismic. I didn't know. How could I? My heart was a battlefield, warring between the dean who carefully folded my laundry and remembered my favorite coffee order, the dean who danced me through power outages with a flashlight and a silly grin, the man I had built a life with, the man I loved. And then there was the other dean, the one who had forged my trust like a bad check, who had built a secret life behind my back, who had allowed me to believe a lie for 8 years. I hated that dean with a ferocity that surprised me. The therapist, understanding the magnitude of my internal struggle, didn't press for an immediate answer. Instead, she gave us homework, a roadmap for navigating the treacherous terrain ahead. First, separate finances, a stark, necessary boundary to rebuild financial autonomy and transparency. Second, full transparency. Every account, every password, every financial decision laid bare. Third, individual therapy for both of us, to process our individual traumas and the roles we each played. And finally, 6 months. 6 months to work through it, to see if the cracks could be repaired, to decide if our shattered foundation could ever be rebuilt. 6 months to decide if I stayed, or if I walked away from the man who was both my greatest love and my deepest wound. The first step of our homework was the budget meeting. It felt less like a romantic partnership activity and more like a corporate audit, but it was essential. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, yellow legal pads spread between us, a stark symbol of the new, clinical reality of our relationship. Dean, true to his word, handed me control of every account, every password, every login, laid out for me to scrutinize. There was no hesitation, no attempt to hold back. It was painful, but it was honest. We built a spreadsheet, a meticulous, itemized ledger of our new reality. Rent, groceries, utility bills, and then a new line item, his child's meds. The cost was sobering, a stark reminder of the financial burden he'd been shouldering alone. Then came another line, his debt to me, the $48,000, plus interest, plus the emotional toll. We didn't call it that, but it was implied in the cold, hard numbers. Dean took on a second job, delivering appliances nights and weekends, his already long days stretching into weary nights. The man who once hid numbers, who manipulated our finances in the shadows, now texted me screenshots of every tip, every extra payment he earned, a silent daily act of contrition. It was a tangible effort, a grueling physical manifestation of his commitment to transparency and repair. It wasn't glamorous, and it certainly wasn't easy, but it was a start. It was an acknowledgement that he had broken something vital, and he was willing to work, literally, to try and fix it. One of the most difficult, yet crucial boundaries I set was around meeting his son. "I won't meet him," I told Dean, my voice firm, "until I feel steady, until we feel steady." It wasn't out of malice or a lack of empathy for the child. It was a protection for myself, and honestly, for the boy too. I couldn't introduce myself to this innocent child while my own heart was still in shards, while my emotions were still a volatile mess of anger, grief, and confusion. Dean, to his credit, respected it completely. There were no arguments, no pleas, just a quiet nod of understanding. He knew I needed that space, that time to heal before I could open myself up to that kind of emotional complexity. In the meantime, something unexpected blossomed. Lexi and I, the two women unknowingly caught in Dean's web started texting. It began tentatively, with practical updates about the boy, about Dean's payments. But slowly, organically, it evolved. We started sharing memes, commiserating over the absurdities of life, even offering each other advice. It was strange, this unlikely alliance, forged in the fires of betrayal. We were united in a common goal: to ensure the boy felt loved, supported, and never, ever bargained over. We found a common ground, a shared understanding that transcended the initial shock and pain. It wasn't friendship, not exactly, but it was a bond of mutual respect and shared experience, a testament to the fact that even in the darkest corners of deceit, humanity can find a way to connect. The budget meetings, the raw honesty, the small steps towards repair, they were all necessary, but they didn't magically erase the pain. Some mornings, I woke up shaking, the full weight of the betrayal crashing down on me all over again. The naive, easy marriage I once had, the one built on unquestioning trust, was gone forever. That knowledge was a fresh wound every day. I'd punch pillows until my knuckles ached, a desperate physical release for the fury churning inside me. I'd write unsent letters to Dean, venomous screeds calling him a coward, a liar, a thief of my peace. I never sent them, but the act of writing, of articulating the depth of my rage, was cathartic. My individual therapy sessions became a space for this unbridled anger. My therapist, ever insightful, offered a profound truth. Anger is love disappointed. And I was so disappointed. I wore that disappointment like a sunburn, raw and exposed, stinging with every touch. It was a heavy cloak, weighing me down, but also protecting me in a strange way. It was a necessary phase, a vital part of the healing process, allowing me to fully feel the depth of what had been lost, what had been stolen. I had to acknowledge the anger, to sit with it, to understand its source, before I could even begin to think about moving past it. It was messy, it was ugly, but it was real. Amidst the anger and the raw emotion, Dean continued his quiet, persistent efforts to repair. He started cooking again, something he hadn't done much since our early married days. He'd make me salmon, exactly the way my mom used to, with a lemon dill sauce that always brought a pang of bittersweet nostalgia. I'd find little notes tucked into my work bag, simple messages like, "I'm still here, still fighting for us," or "thinking of you, always." They weren't grand gestures, but they were consistent, small acts of presence and persistence. I didn't forgive quickly. Forgiveness felt like an impossible summit to reach. But I noticed the effort. I saw him trying, day after day, to demonstrate his commitment to rebuilding. One night, after a particularly draining day, he reached for me, his hand gentle on my back. I tensed, my body still instinctively recoiling from his touch, a reflex born of betrayal. But then, I relaxed, just a fraction. I let him hold me for 20 seconds longer than the night before. 20 seconds. It was a tiny increment, a minuscule step, but it was a step. It wasn't love. Not yet. Not in the way it used to be. But it was an acknowledgement, a hesitant opening, a quiet recognition of his unwavering presence. It was the slow, painstaking work of mending, thread by painful thread. The secret, once exposed to me, couldn't stay contained forever. Dean's parents, pillars of their church community, learned the truth at Easter dinner. It was a tense, agonizing meal. Dean, with a newfound courage, confessed everything. His mother wept openly, her face etched with sorrow and shock. "We raised you better, Dean," she choked out, her voice thick with disappointment and a profound sense of failure. His father, a man of few words, simply stared at his son for a long moment, then asked quietly, "Can the boy visit the farm, Dean? When he's ready?" It wasn't a question of judgment, but of acceptance. a reaching out to the innocent party in this tangled mess. Dean, his voice hoarse, replied, "When he's ready, Dad. When he's ready." I watched the scene unfold, a silent observer to the generational ripple effect of his lies. I saw remorse rewrite generations, a legacy of carefully curated respect, now fractured by truth. It was painful, raw, and deeply uncomfortable, but it was also a necessary purging. The truth, once spoken aloud, has a way of clearing the air, even if it leaves behind a trail of devastation. It was a stark reminder that his choices had consequences far beyond just the two of us, impacting the entire fabric of his family. Amidst all the chaos and the focus on Dean's actions, my individual therapy sessions became a crucial space for me. It wasn't just about processing his betrayal. It was about looking inward. Turns out, I had to own my part in this narrative, not in the sense of being responsible for his lies, but for my own blissful blindness. My therapist gently, but firmly, pointed out the red flags I'd ignored over the years. Dean's panic at pregnancy jokes, his sudden avoidance of joint budgeting apps, the way he'd deflect whenever I brought up our stagnant savings. I had subconsciously filed them away, rationalized them, or simply chosen not to see them, prioritizing the comfort of my perceived perfect marriage over the discomfort of deeper inquiry. It was a hard truth to swallow. No one wants to admit they were complicit, even unwittingly, in their own deception. But I realized that I couldn't truly heal, couldn't truly move forward, until I acknowledged that tendency within myself. I had to own my blissful blindness so it wouldn't own me again. It was a powerful, humbling realization that shifted my perspective. It wasn't about blaming myself, but about empowering myself, learning to trust my own instincts, to ask the hard questions, and to demand transparency, not just from others, but from myself. 6 months after the initial earthquake, with weekly therapy sessions and endless difficult conversations, we finally sat down to formalize our path forward. We drafted a post-nuptial agreement, a document that felt both cold and necessary. It stated explicitly that any future hidden accounts, any undisclosed financial arrangements, would result in the forfeiture of half of those assets to me. It was a stark, legal consequence, a tangible safeguard against any relapse into secrecy. Dean signed it without flinching, his hand steady, his gaze meeting mine with a sincerity I hadn't seen in years. It was an act of profound humility, an acknowledgement of the depth of his past deception and his commitment to a new, transparent future. After that, we did something that felt almost symbolic. We opened a new shared savings account. We labeled it simply, House, No Lies. Watching the balance grow, knowing every dollar was earned and saved with full transparency, felt like physical therapy for my soul. Each deposit, each incremental increase, was a small step towards rebuilding, not just our financial future, but the fragile trust between us. It was a testament to the idea that even after profound betrayal, it is possible to reconstruct something new, something stronger, built on a foundation of hard-won honesty. 6 months. 6 months of grueling emotional work, of painful honesty, of slow, deliberate rebuilding. And then, Lexi called. It was an invitation to his birthday picnic. Her son, Dean's son, was turning 5. My stomach clenched with a mix of nerves and a strange anticipation. This was it. The moment I had both dreaded and, in a way, longed for. I arrived with a dinosaur book, a carefully chosen gift for a little boy I barely knew. The picnic was bustling, full of children and laughter. And then I saw him. A whirlwind of sandy curls and bright eyes, a carbon copy of Dean's childhood photos. He ran up to me, a half-eaten cookie clutched in his hand, and offered it to me with a wide, dimpled grin. Dean's eyes, unmistakably, lit up in that tiny, innocent face. In that moment, watching him, seeing the joy and light in his eyes, something inside me exhaled. It wasn't approval. It wasn't instant forgiveness. It was acceptance. acceptance of this new, complex reality. Acceptance of this child, who was innocent in all of this, and whose existence was now undeniably a part of my life. It was a profound, quiet shift, a softening of a hardened heart, a recognition that life, even after betrayal, continues to unfold, bringing with it new connections and unexpected moments of grace. Life, as they say, finds a way, and so do we. The financial landscape of our lives is now meticulously, painfully transparent. Dean sends $400 a month to Lexi, a figure that has been court-verified, legally binding, and fully transparent. No more secret wires, no more hidden envelopes. The other $100 he used to slide under the table, the extra undeclared cash, now funds therapy co-pays for both of us, an investment in our mental and emotional well-being. It's a tangible shift, a reallocation of resources from a secret past to a healing future. And the house? Our new house closes next month. It's not the grand mansion we once dreamed of, but it's perfect. Small, yellow, with a backyard big enough for tomatoes and apologies. A place where we can truly start fresh, without the specter of hidden truths lurking in the shadows. It's a symbol, not of a perfect life, but of a real one, built on honesty, hard work, and the painful, slow process of rebuilding. We're still navigating the complexities, still learning to trust, still healing, but we're doing it together, with open books and open hearts. If you're out there, living a story that just doesn't quite add up, if a nagging feeling keeps you up at night, please, for your own sake, pull the statements. Ask the uncomfortable questions. Demand the truth. Your peace of mind, your financial security, your very sense of self depends on it. If tonight's story resonates with you, if it helps you feel a little less alone in whatever silent battle you're fighting, hit that like button. Subscribe for more real-life twists, because sometimes the truth is stranger and harder than fiction. And drop your city in the comments below. Let us know where the brave ones are watching, where people are finding the courage to face their own difficult truths. Betrayal doesn't always look like lipstick on a collar or a late-night text from a stranger. Sometimes it's far more insidious, far more subtle. Sometimes it's the quiet silence in a bank app, the slow, steady drain of trust, the invisible threads that hold a secret life together. Recovery isn't linear. It's a winding, uneven path. Some days I still snoop, a flicker of old suspicion, a reflex born of trauma. Some days I still flinch, a sudden memory bringing back a wave of hurt. But I've learned a profound truth. Secrets lose their power when they are spoken aloud. When they are dragged into the light, they shrink, they shrivel, they lose their suffocating grip. Speak yours, whether it's out there to the world or quietly, in the dark, to yourself. Acknowledge it. Then, and only then, can you truly decide if you stay or if you go. Either choice is valid when it's truly yours, made with eyes wide open, on a foundation of truth, not lies.